I intended to get time to get a copy of a label to send to you in an MSDS sheet, but I've been kind of overwhelmed. I've got to conduct a faculty meeting this afternoon, and I was trying to get some of my stuff together for that, so I kind of neglected you guys, but I'll try to get that done sometime this week.
So do we have class this afternoon?
That's not mine.
I'm here, but aren't you supposed to sit in here with us?
Well, more than likely I will make arrangements to talk to you. I mean, I'll come and turn the machine on. I may leave a little bit early, but Amanda knows how to navigate the equipment, so she has experience with it. So. No. I can't dismiss you from Mr. Scales' class. That's not within my sphere of influence.
Yes, besides, because I want to make sure that I can give you all the tests next week without y'all having withdraw or anything like that, so I need to stay on schedule.
Everybody else is more rigorous than I am. I'm old and fat and a short timer, so it doesn't. I don't have that drive that some of these more professional individuals have. You'll find I'm kind of slacker. All right.
I just put the chapter 5 one out there 20 minutes ago.
Okay, so we're
That's fine. Yeah. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning.
What's the news, Ryan? We heard you've been out circulating in campus. We need to find out what you've been doing.
He has to make money and feed the house. That's what he told me.
He has to make money and meet females. Is that what you just said? You said
Yeah.
To feed all my females.
to feed all his females.
He hadn't told me a thing, though. Y'all are giving him all the credit for all this activity, but he hasn't admitted to a thing.
No, he hasn't. You haven't admitted to actually doing anything. Everybody's accusing or giving you credit for doing things. You haven't admitted to anything.
They watch.
Yeah. No. See, he's being smart about it. He's got plausible deniability there. He said nothing, officer.
It's all right. Okay.
Exactly.
Mr. Officer,
Ossifer, yes. Yes, officer.
That's where you're drunk on that bath.
Yes. Yeah. Did they done that?
All right, we're going to try to finish up this third chapter talking about labeling. And there is what they call a sample label for education and demonstration purposes only. And that's on the page 27 of chapter 3. And it's totally fictitious in that it's gives you the company as Pest Chem CO, and it says that the material is X Pest EC, and then it outlines just the different elements or portions that are included in a pesticide label. My intention is I'm going to give you all or provide for you a couple of more realistic labels. One of them is probably going to be one that's got the caution label on it, and I'm going to give you another one that's much more toxic. It's got the danger skull and crossbones on it. Just so you'll be able to look at them, but they have the active ingredient statement, and it's going to have the first aid and the precautionary statements that are normally included on a legitimate label. It's going to include also the environmental hazards. And we didn't talk about that at all the other day, but environmental hazards are just what they say. They are potential hazards to the environment, whether we're talking about the actual spill of a chemical, or whether we're talking about drift, or we're talking about the misuse of a label that may be off target. We all understand what a pesticide spill would be. That would be where either the concentrated or the diluted material spills from a container or a tank, and that
Into
will
the environment.
do what?
And gets into the environment.
Well, it gets away. Now, whether it's onto soil or pavement or concrete or a waterway would be much more of a danger than any of these other things. We didn't talk about drift, but pesticide drift is a major concern as we are applying pesticides. It depends upon the crop that you're treating and the mechanism and the equipment that you're using. If you're using, yes.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I just pulled up off of the EPA's website a sample pesticide label. It's actually what they call it. Do you want me to do share screen and you talk about it, or?
It doesn't matter, Tom, because the one that's in the book's very similar.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. I'm gonna give them a couple of more realistic instead of fictitious ones so they can look at. And I want to be able to compare and contrast the two different labels with the warning statements and the PPE that's required, personal protective equipment and things of that type. So they're quite different as you look at two different labels. So,
Okay.
I'll do that. I'll do that when I get to the office, or sometime tomorrow. I doubt that I get it done today because I got that faculty meeting I got to do. But as we talk about environmental hazards, have any of you ever had any experience with? Well, I started to talk about if you're using a small handheld, gallon or 3-gallon spray, drift is generally not a big concern, not a big problem, because you've got a single handheld gun and you control the pressure either by the amount that you pump the handle or the amount that you're still pumping the handle if it's a knapsack sprayer. So as long as you maintain that normal operating pressure, you can control that gun and keep it out of the wind and keep it low, and you don't have too much of a problem with drift. Now, when we were operating the apple orchard the way we used to, we had 2 500-gallon, what we call speed sprayers, that we pull behind a tractor. And each of them had a power unit, an engine. The more recent one we had a 453 Detroit diesel engine that powered a 250-gallon per minute pump that would run at about 180 pounds pressure. And then that would put the solution out in the midst, in a stream of air that was generated by a 36-inch fan. And we could drive down between 2 rows of apple trees and actually blow the material probably 35 to 40 feet in the air, go through the trees and then up that high. In that situation, you were subject to a tremendous amount of drift. We were always plagued, but particularly in the early part of the year when we were beginning to spray apples, with wind. We'd start normally in the second, third week of March and had no leaves on the trees, and you've heard March winds. Now it would create a problem for us, and we were always concerned about off-target deposits of the chemicals. The majority of the materials that we were using with that were not materials that would be tremendously damaging. I do know of one situation when, not far from us, there was a landowner that had what he thought was real high quality hay fields, and he was concerned about broadleaf weeds that were coming up in his hay field. And he had directed a worker of his to spray those fields with a herbicide to control the broadleaf weeds. And the herbicide that they had selected was one of a 2,4-D type material. And he had told him to do that in the spring before we began to get a lot of early growth. And the guy was pretty hard-nosed, and he didn't take into consideration that the wind was blowing, 15 to 20 miles an hour on the afternoon that he was trying to do it. Bottom line, he had enough drift from that application to the houses that were on the other side of the paved road that it killed a lot of dogwood trees, a lot of young maple trees that were beginning to leaf out because of the toxicity of the 2,4-D. Those trees were extremely sensitive to that. And that was a product of mishandling, misapplication, and the drift that occurred because of that. So, when we're talking about environmental hazards, things such as drift are a concern.
It's kind of funny you wouldn't have, anticipated the area where it could potentially flow to.
Well, the individual that gave those directions was pretty headstrong and demanded. It was his way or no way, and he wanted to get it done, and he told the man to do it, even though it was not the proper time to do it. In the areas where tobacco is being widely grown, there is a herbicide that is being used, particularly in our area, and I don't know whether it's being used down south side or not, but it's either Command or a similar material to Command. They've modified some of those materials, but that is a material that's extremely volatile, and there is quite often drift that occurs from there. There's one tobacco production area that's on the road to my house where the lanthus bushes or the trees of that type, the leaves are not green, they are white. And that's a product of the volatility, the volatile drift that occurred from the application of that Command. And that was done on roughly the 1st of May. But the leaves on those trees are as white as Taylor's t-shirt there. So that's just another example of drift. If you travel near a tobacco field in your area and happen to notice some of the trees and shrubs that are around the edge of that field or have white foliage, that's a product of the drift that has occurred from that, and that's an environmental hazard. The label also has directions for use. It gives you specific directions. It gives you directions for storage and disposal. Disposal of the actual concentrated material is one thing. Disposal of the container in which it comes in is another. Pesticide disposal is usually done in a hazmat type of deposition. You have unused or unwanted chemicals. The state will usually provide an opportunity to dispose of hazmat materials which unused pesticides do qualify to. But if you have containers, you've used up all of the material out of those containers, you're supposed to, most of these containers are plastic jugs anymore. Sometimes they're paper containers or plastic bags, but the jugs are supposed to be what we call triple rinsed, which means you actually rinse the jug out 3 times, and you put that rinsate. The best use of that is to put it back into the tank that you're going to be spraying out, and then those things can be offered for recycling or reconditioning. If they're not done that way, you're supposed to puncture them. And there are devices that are available to puncture them in, and then you have that attached to a water hose and rinse those out. And then if you puncture them, you dispose of them in sanitary landfill. The reason for puncturing a container, a jug like that, is to prevent someone from reusing it for something. They are real good containers and they're real handy to use. Say you've got a dog out in a lot behind the house, and there would be real convenient to use that to transport water out to the dog. But if it,
potential that there might be some lingering chemicals.
yeah, that's why they don't want them to be reused. One of the reasons. So it says you're not supposed to reuse an empty container. It's got the normal label has an agricultural use requirement statement, and it's got a non-ag use requirement, and then it's got a general precautions and restrictions statement. Then it's going to have a designation for the personal protective equipment, or the PPE, that is required for the specific use of that chemical for the mixer and loader, and then it's going to have the PPE that's required for the applicator. Yeah.
Regarding PPE, is there any product that's available commercially or privately that would require the use of a full hazmat suit?
You're asking an extreme situation, and I'm reluctant to answer your question, Tyler, because there are always exceptions. Okay, but I don't know what you mean as a full hazmat suit. I don't know.
Full sealed environmental suit.
Warfare? What are you talking about?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm sure there are exceptions, particularly when you're dealing with highly concentrated materials that have some volatility. And a general use or agricultural chemical that you're going to have any need for, I'd say no.
All right. So generally, the most you'll ever need is a rubber suit and a mask.
I'm going to bring you I've got some sample materials in my office that I'm going to bring one day, and we'll dress you up, and get you all ready to go, so you'll see what's involved with it. Okay? But there are differences in the PPE that's required for mixers and loaders, for applicators, and then for calibrating and cleaning equipment. They're different requirements. And assume that you're working with a chemical, and you're dressed just as Tyler is today, with shorts and a t-shirt on, and a pesticide inspector happens to come by and inquire about what you were using, what kind of material. And if you may have been using a material that was listed as danger, and he's dressed in that manner, he would be subject to some sort of citation from the Department of Agriculture.
I mean, that's just common sense. If you're working with something dangerous, you need to protect yourself.
Well, and that's the premise under which the majority of these regulations are written, on common sense. They're done on the side of safety. So, typical label is going to have some physical and chemical hazard control, some engineering control. Then it's going to have a segment on application instructions, and it's going to tell you how to apply it, the rate, and how it's supposed to be applied. And then it's going to have a warranty disclaimer. So those are just the basic components of a label. So if you got any questions about those, please share them. Otherwise, I'll get those labels. What I'm probably going to do is copy them over, and my intention is to probably send them as an attachment in Blackboard to your email site. That way each of you will be able to get it and have access to it. Just for reference, we'll talk about that.
So
All right.
Leftover.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ayers, if you have leftover materials, what would you just store them? Or it just depends on what it is?
All right, I did, because the audio, I didn't get all your questions. Give me that one more time.
Okay. depending on what you're spraying or working with,
Uh-huh.
and you have like quite a bit left over, and say it was something that you're not supposed to store,
Okay.
what would you do?
All right, one of the challenges in the scenario that you give me, you're supposed to try to mix or formulate the amount that it's going to be needed.
Okay.
It's one of your goals. You need to evaluate the area that you're supposed to cover and assume that you've got 2 acres and you're applying at a rate of 100 gallons per acre. You should target to try to mix up to 100 gallons. But inevitably we do have errors in what we're doing, and assume that you've mixed 200 gallons and when you completed your spraying, you had 25 gallons left. The best alternative and the recommended alternative is to go back and reapply. In other words, use that 25 gallons that you had in excess, put that on the same area that you had attempted to cover. Okay? That's the normal recommendation. Now, if you had an enormous amount, you got a problem, because technically you can't just dump it. You don't want to do that. It's costing you money, and you don't want to hold it over in a sprayer. And I'll share with you a scenario that happened back when I was just a young guy. There was at that time there were probably 30 or 40 commercial apple and peach growers in our community, and my dad had a pesticide business on the side. In other words, we get quite a bit more chemical in than what we needed, and a lot of the local guys would come to us and get or purchase the materials that they needed to use to put on their apples or peaches. And we had one old gentleman that lived up the road, and he had about 3 acres of peach trees. And I think he had about a 300-gallon sprayer, but it would only take him about 150 gallons to cover his orchard. So one year he thought, well, he'd mix the full 300 gallons, and when he needed to spray next week, and he'd spray it this week. When he needed to spray next week, he'd have that already mixed up, ready to go. And he was using wettable sulfur as a fungicide and diluting that in water as a carrier. And that was a normal spray with a little bit of insecticide early in the season to control diseases on his peaches. So the gentleman, say, sprayed this week with that, used up half a tank. Next week he went in and sprayed again, using the remainder of that. But it had sat in that tank all week. And if you have any knowledge of chemistry at all, and you mixed sulfur and water and let it hold for a little while, what would you think you get?
I'm not sure.
Well, you get sulfuric acid.
Why? Is that what you're gonna say?
Sulfuric
Yeah,
acid.
you get sulfuric acid. You get sulfur and water. Through the process of time in a metal tank, you got the formation of a sulfur acid. And when he sprayed that second time, it in effect took all the leaves off his peach trees. And he came to Dad and wanted to know what was the problem. But that's what it was. He had held that solution in that metal tank for 7 or 8 days, and that combination had reacted, and he'd actually sprayed sulfuric acid on his trees. It didn't kill him, but he didn't have any peaches that year. But that's one of the examples of not holding material over, not trying to save it. So, your target is to try to make, mix the volume that it's going to take to cover the area that you need, and not have any left over. If you do, you just go back over. I get caught in the little vineyard here at the college all the time. I try to mix about 100 gallons, and normally it takes me about 90 to spray the vineyard here, and I'll take the other 10 gallons and and drive a little faster and blow it out over the same area. Does that answer your question, Carol?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, not a problem. Okay, gonna try to activate the video for this, and we'll see how it looks. If I can get the right buttons pushed.
Okay, I'm gonna mute our microphone and I'll text you if it doesn't work, or if it is.
Welcome to Pesticide Labeling, presented by Pat Hipkins, Senior Research Associate and Assistant Pesticide Coordinator at Virginia Tech Pesticide Programs, and adapted from Applying Pesticides Correctly, Unit 3. Now here's Pat to discuss pesticide labeling.
The pesticide product label is a comprehensive document that contains all the information you need to use the product safely and effectively. The Environmental Protection Agency reviews all pesticide product labels to make sure that they contain all required components and that the information is complete and accurate. Under Section 3 of FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, the EPA can register pesticides for use throughout the United States. Section 18 of FIFRA allows state and federal agencies to permit the unregistered use of a registered product in a specific geographic.
Tom and them don't see it. Try again.
Welcome to Pesticide Labeling, presented by Pat Hipkins, Senior Research Associate and Assistant Pesticide Coordinator at Virginia Tech Pesticide Programs, and adapted from Applying Pesticides Correctly, Unit 3. Now here's Pat to discuss pesticide labeling.
The pesticide product label is a comprehensive document that contains all the information you need to use the product safely and effectively.
Got to go back again. You still didn't get it.
Welcome to Pesticide Labeling, presented by Pat Hipkins. Senior Research Associate and Assistant Pesticide Coordinator at Virginia Tech Pesticide Programs, and adapted from Applying Pesticides Correctly, Unit 3. Now here's Pat to discuss pesticide labeling.
I'm afraid to monkey with it if I get it right.
The pesticide product label is a comprehensive document that contains all the information you need to use the product safely and effectively.
Okay.
The Environmental Protection Agency reviews all pesticide product labels to make sure that they contain all required components and that the information is complete and accurate. Under Section 3 of FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, the EPA can register pesticides for use throughout the United States. Section 18 of FIFRA allows state and federal agencies to permit the unregistered use of a registered product in a specific geographic area for a limited time if emergency pest conditions exist. Section 24C of FIFRA is designed to solve local or regional pest problems. It allows states to register a federally registered product for an additional use, as long as there is both a demonstrated special local need and tolerance.
All right, you still no. Tom, you back?
Yes, wait,
All right.
Okay, I just unmuted us.
yes.
Okay. I don't know what's going on with this thing. I'm gonna keep playing with it and trying to rerun a particular portion of it here. And if you get it, just text me, okay?
Okay.
Under Section 3 of FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, the EPA can register pesticides for use throughout the United States. Section 18 of FIFRA allows state and federal agencies to permit the unregistered use of a registered product in a specific geographic area for a limited time if emergency pest conditions exist. Section 24C of FIFRA is designed to solve a local or regional pest problem. It allows states to register a federally registered product for an additional use, as long as there is both a demonstrated special local need and tolerance.
Trying to operate, I'm gonna rerun that one just until we try to
Under
get it going.
Section 3 of FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, the EPA can register pesticides for use throughout the United States. Section 18 of FIFRA allows state and federal agencies to permit the unregistered use
Okay,
of a
you got it.
registered product in a specific geographic area for a limited time if emergency pest conditions exist. Section 24C of FIFRA is designed to solve a local or regional pest problem. It allows states to register a federally registered product for an additional use, as long as there is both a demonstrated special local need and tolerance. The information that EPA requires to be placed on each and every pesticide label is listed in the notes pages of this slide. However, you can group that information into four main categories. First, identifying information. What is it? Second, precautionary statements. What do you have to worry about or take special care of if you're handling or using this product? Third, directions for use. Where can you put it, how much, how often? And fourth, conditions of sale. Identifying information includes brand name and ingredient statement. In this case, the brand name is Diazinon AG500, and the ingredient statement tells you that it's 48% Diazinon and 52% inert ingredients. Two extremely important components of identifying information are the EPA registration number and the EPA establishment number. The EPA registration number is the fingerprint for the product. Each product has its own specific identifying EPA registration number, and the establishment number tells you where the product was manufactured. This may become important if there's a case of a recall, or if you have a problem with the product and want to report it, and they can figure out then what batch and where it came from. Identifying information also includes the name and address of the manufacturer. The net contents tells you that this product came in a 2.5 gallon package. And also, if you look right above, you'll notice that it's a 4 pound gallon, meaning there's 4 pounds of diazinon per gallon. So in the 2.5 gallon package, there would be 10 pounds of active ingredient. Often, pesticide brand names are descriptive. In this case, you see that you're purchasing an herbicide, 50% active ingredient in water-soluble packages. If you look right below, you'll also see where this product may be used, where it's not to be used, for example, home lawns, and that it's intended for professional use and not for sale to homeowners. Similarly, this product, same active ingredient, is a granular formulation. Last but not least, the identifying information section of the label will tell you if the product is restricted use or not. EPA classifies pesticides into one of two groups. General use products, like over-the-counter drugs, may be purchased by anyone. On the other hand, restricted use products have additional regulatory restrictions placed on them to avoid potential unreasonable adverse effects. These additional restrictions are done to reduce risk and to ensure that these products are purchased only by people who have the training to use them correctly. This product is classified as restricted use because it's highly toxic. However, acute toxicity is not the only factor EPA considers when deciding whether to classify a pesticide as restricted use or not. This product was classified as restricted use because of ground and surface water concerns. It is not a particularly toxic product. It is, however, moderately persistent and heavily used by corn growers, and in some locations was being detected in both ground and surface water. This product was classified as restricted use not because it's highly toxic to people, but rather because it's highly toxic to birds and to aquatic organisms. The precautionary statement section of a label includes product-specific hazards. Most labels, except for those that are actually intended for use on children, will have a child hazard warning statement. Keep out of the reach of children. Signal words will be found in the precautionary statement section of the label. There are 4 options: danger, poison with skull and crossbones, danger, warning, and caution. The danger, poison, skull, and crossbones on the product label indicates that it's extremely toxic. Products that carry a danger label without the skull and crossbones are highly toxic or hazardous in some manner. A danger signal word indicates that the product may cause acute illness from oral, dermal, or inhalation exposure, or cause severe eye or skin irritation. Products with a warning label are moderately toxic. The least toxic pesticide products carry a caution label. The statement of practical treatment describes first aid measures to take if someone is exposed to the pesticide. Precautionary statements include hazards to humans and domestic animals. In the case of this product, you can see it causes eye irritation, and there are specific instructions for people who will handle it. Personal protective equipment requirements, PPE requirements, will also be found in the precautionary statement section of a product label. In addition, you may find instructions for cleaning and maintaining PPE. Environmental hazards and physical and chemical hazards will also be described. Finally, if there are any specific engineering controls that one must use when handling the product, they will be described. The label will describe conditions of sale and limitations on warranty and liability. The directions for use section begins by reminding the user that it is a violation of federal law to use the product in a manner inconsistent with its label. Depending on the product's use patterns, you will find agricultural use requirements, non-agricultural use requirements, or both in the directions for use section of a label. Agricultural use requirements refer to the worker protection standard, describe notification requirements, if any, tell you how long you have to keep workers out of treated areas, and list the PPE that people must use if they go back into a treated area before the restricted entry interval expires. Non-agricultural use requirements generally are shorter and simpler and may describe how long you have to keep people out of areas that have been treated. Products with agricultural use requirements may require that you notify workers about treated areas, either orally or by posting signs, or by using both methods. The directions for use section will tell you where you can use a product, how much you can use, and how often. Other information that may be found in the directions for use will include the pests the product will control, mixing directions, equipment use directions, or other information that would be useful to a handler or applicator. You will also find instructions about proper storage and disposal information for both products and containers in the directions for use section of a label. In some cases, labels contain requirements that I'm going to call directions for use by reference. And what I mean by that is the complete instructions aren't printed on that label, but rather the label refers you to another source. In this example, anyone who uses a product containing pesticide atrazine is required to check to see if there are any prohibitions on use of that product within the watershed where the application site is located. Another example would be worker protection requirements. You will notice that they refer to the Worker Protection Standard 40 CFR Part 170. They don't list all of the instructions and requirements that farmers who employ workers have. For example, they don't talk about central notification. They don't talk about having decontamination stations. They don't list a lot of the things that a grower with workers does indeed have to do. They simply refer you to another document where all those requirements are described in detail. Remember, the label is the law. The pesticide product label is a binding legal agreement between the company that wrote the label directions, the federal agency that accepted them and registered the product, and the end user.
I think the label might be the law.
The label has all the instructions an applicator needs to use the product correctly and safely. Applicators must read, understand, and follow label directions. It is illegal to use a pesticide on any plant, animal, or site that's not listed on that product label. In addition, you can't use more than the label specifies, meaning higher rate or more often. Applicators are bound to follow all the label directions for handling, including transport, mixing, loading, applying, storage, and ultimately disposal of pesticides and the containers they come in. Federal law does allow you to use pesticides in some ways that are not specifically prohibited by the label. For example, you may use a pesticide at a lower rate or less often than the label directs. However, I advise you to do that only if you have research-based information to support that reduction. That's because if you cut the rate and it doesn't work, that first application has been a waste of your time and your money. You've exposed the environment to that pesticide for no benefit. The pest has got that much of a jump on you now, be it a day, week, month, between the ineffective application when you have to come back and do it again. And last but not least, it may lead to resistance problems. Unless your state law prohibits it, you may use a pesticide to control a target pest that's not listed on the label. However, all other application requirements must be met. For example, the timing of the application, the rate, etc. You also may use any appropriate application equipment or technique unless the label specifically prohibits it. Unless state law or the label prohibits, applicators may mix pesticide with fertilizer. You may also mix 2 or more pesticides, assuming that the rate for each component of the mixture is at or below the label rate for each individual product. The bottom line, pesticide label directions are legal requirements and applicators are bound to follow the label. You should read the label before you buy a product and then again before, during, and after each use. You should read it before you buy it to make sure that you can use that product in the place and the manner you intend and that you have the skill and the application equipment to use it properly. You should recheck everything before you mix up a batch of the product and before you put it away. Label directions change. Just because something could be applied to a crop or site 5 years ago doesn't mean that application is still legal today. Just because a certain rate was set 5 years ago doesn't mean that's the rate that's legal today. You should read the label because labels change. You should also read the label because sometimes you get in a rut, you think you know what you're doing, and you become complacent, and you're apt to make a mistake under those conditions. Pesticide product labels are directions for the applicator or the end user. Material safety data sheets are part of a HAZCOM requirement for people who are exposed to hazardous materials in the workplace. The label is the legally binding document that directs the applicator. The material safety data sheet provides useful information for people who are exposed to hazardous materials in the workplace, starting with the people who will handle pesticides in a production facility. But the MSDS should follow the pesticide product label down the chain to the end user and can direct you about a lot of things that you may be interested in or find useful. For example, the toxicology of the formulated product, handling or transport information, accident procedures, environmental hazards, and the like.
And that's the end of our presentation on pesticide labeling. Thanks for listening.
I think we need to obey what the label says. Just maybe.
Okay, any questions?
Do you have any questions?
She basically went over what we talked about this morning again. So, but the label and the labeling of pesticides is an important concept. It controls or should control everything you do with respect to the use of pesticides. There's do's and don'ts, and it basically tells you do's and don'ts. So,
Because the people who made that information actually went through enough testing to know what they're talking about.
they did, and there's a lot of legal ramifications and hazards that are associated with them. You know, and you know, it's just, you know, and as people that are going to be, you know, working in agriculture or familiar with agriculture or exposed to agriculture are going to be, you know, involved in the application and use of pesticides. So, you know, this is information that you not only need to be aware of and use, you need to wear it. I mean, it's stuff that you're going to have to deal with. If you don't have any questions, that'll finish up chapter 3. We'll look at 4 next week. So I'll try not to be too mean to you, let you go. But if you need me, let me know. And I'll try to send you some labels for you to look at. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Have a good day, good weekend.